Only true if you yeah, that's the problem. As soon as you want to say something,
Yeah. So hello everybody, welcome to TCP Inc. We two are the new chairs, so my name is Mia Kulewind.
And I'm David Black, and I'm frantically reading the mailing list and all the drafts.
So welcome to Yokohama. First, of course, I show you the node well that applies to the session. So please read it carefully and be aware that everything you say applies here to the node well. And then I have this very nice slide with some information. For those people who are participating over Meet Echo, we have this virtual queue system. So we will try to look at it and monitor and try to get you in if you want to say something. And there's also a big screen in the room. So if you ignore it, people will shout at us, I guess. Yeah, what happened so far? This working group was chartered about a year ago. And during the BOF process, there was basically only one proposal, but right when the working group was chartered, there were two conflicting proposals, how to solve or how to address the charter that we have. And over the last couple of meetings, there were a lot of discussions which one to take, and there are technical reasons for one or the other, and so we didn't get to a solution here. And so after the last meeting, we got a new document in which is called TCP-INO, which provides all the TCP negotiation which is needed for one or the other proposal. So we managed to very quickly adopt this document. That was our first working group document, and there was already a lot of feedback and work put into this, so thank you very much for that. And we just adopted yesterday both of the solution proposals as working group documents. So the plan is not to standardize both of them, because our charter aims basically for one solution, and if we're going to standardize two incompatible solutions, then there's like the goal of reaching opportunistic encryption is going more far away, because then they might not be able to talk to each other. So there's clearly a goal to come to one kind of solution, and from my point of view, there are three ways to reach it. Either both approaches converge into each other. I think this might not be happening because they might be just too far away from each other. The second proposal is like we work on both of the proposals and we get to a point where there is a clear view of the working group that might be technical reasons or other reasons which one to take. I think this was not happening so far because both of the proposals had a different maturity. There was like one proposal which was around for a while, had implementations and like all the details, and another proposal where the description was very rough, but they are catching up, so there's more information, they are working on implementation, so maybe there's a chance that we can make a decision at some point. And there is a third way where we kind of still standardize both of the proposals, but we make one of them mandatory, so we have a default way to talk to each other, and the other one would be something like a version you can negotiate in the handshake or something like that. But that's also something the working group has to talk about.
To put another perspective on this, interoperability is a mandatory, non-negotiable requirement. However, there is more than one way to get there from here, as shown on the 3 options in the screen. One of the IETF's mantra principles is rough consensus and running code. We've had quite a bit of an adventure with rough consensus. It's time to lay a little more emphasis on running code that actually solves the problem.
So what we're planning to reach our goals from here is, first of all, we want to assign Shepherd to all of the working documents very soon, so we get a little bit more feedback here. Then we are basically looking for a second editor for the TLS solution, because having more than one eye on there and more than one person working on the document could speed up the process. So if you like to volunteer here, let us know. And the third thing, which is important, is we would like to have expert reviews like in February, mid or end of February. So we would like to see both proposals in a state where it actually makes sense to have expert reviews, and get some more feedback from those experts. And those experts will be experts from the transport area as well as from the security area. And we will request this with our ADs to get those experts in. Say something? Yeah, and like as David just said, it's very important for us here to see implementations, because yeah, one point is we need running code, and we need to show that the implementation is feasible, and we need the experience from the implementation to check if the document actually just describes the right thing. There is a very good, or the TCP crypt already has an implementation around for quite a while for different operation systems and user space, and they updated the implementation, and I believe they are working on a kernel implementation as well. So there is also an outdated kernel implementation. I believe they tried to update it, and you guys might just go to the mic if you want to say something on this, but I think you also give some information on this later in your talk. Okay, and there is a TLS implementation on the way, so it's not there yet, but the authors are working on it, and it will also be user space implementation in the first place. However, we would also like to know if other people are maybe working on one or both of the solutions and have a plan to implement it, because if we have an independent implementation, that would be super helpful to get the working group forward and also to get some feedback on the draft.
Lars Eckert, I'm going to get to my point in the email, but I want to speak here. So we are interested in implementing something, but we're not going to commit resources on something that we might eventually throw away. So I would like one thing that I can tell my people: follow this, implement this. You know, this is what the IETF will do. 2 is one too many. I have a technical preference. It doesn't matter. Overarchingly, I want 1, and I want 1 now, because otherwise this is irrelevant. We can pretend a wonder will happen and they will merge, but I don't see it happening. I don't really care how we make a decision. I don't really care what the outcome is anymore, but I don't want 2, because otherwise, unless there's 1, we're not going to implement it. So, and yeah, that's what I want, and that's why we are not planning on implementing it until there's 1.
So there are 2 points. First of all, you can still implement TCP/INO because that's a common thing, and that's part of the implementation effort. And maybe changing from one to the other solution is, you know, not such a big effort actually. But that's your decision. The other point is also that we won't hold up this group for one of the solutions. So if like one of the solutions has an implementation, a lot of support, everything is ready, and we're ready to go, we go for it, because like it's important for this group to get this wrapped up quickly. And if we're ready with one of the solutions, that's it.
Yeah, I want to, this is David Mazieres from Stanford. I'm one of the co-authors of TCP Crypt. And I want to kind of further the point that that the existence of another draft makes it very hard. So first of all, the protocol that's not implemented is always going to sound like the best protocol, because you can just say things and you haven't worked out all the details. So we've been working on this for years, and like in response to feedback, we make changes to the draft, but then that requires dozens of man hours to change the code. And the problem is that we're and we keep implementing and putting on this working implementations, but because because of the way this process has been running, we don't have much to show for it because, you know, we're still like in competition. So one of the things that's happening to us, for example, is like our funding's over because we've been working on this for years and we're still not done. So if there's anybody in the room who's interested in, whose employer might be interested in making a tax deductible contribution to Stanford to help support this work, like that would be fantastic. And I mean, it's funny, but I'm actually not joking about that. But the other thing is, yeah, we see things like this. Like it would be much easier for us to go out and get an independent implementation if kind of it were clear that like we were the most likely thing to go forward. So I wonder if I don't want to relitigate these options, but I'm wondering if we could do like an option 4, which is sort of temporarily suspend the TLS draft until there's an implementation, and then maybe we could like reinstate it, but at least it would kind of give us the ability to say, well, for the moment, we're the leading candidate, so we'd like to go out and get funded for this, we'd like to encourage people to implement it, and so on. And then, you know, if in a month there's an implementation of the other one, well, great, then we can go back to where we were. But if there isn't, then it won't have like, at least it won't have like slowed us down. Because what's happening is it's really slowing our progress down to have this thing drag on. And it was like, you know, 2 meetings ago, it's like, well, we're going to have implementations by the next meeting. And then the last meeting was like, okay, we're really going to have implementations by, you know, it was even supposed to be this meeting. It was supposed to be like a couple months in or something. And, you know, well, now we're like dragging on to like, well, maybe next meeting we'll really have to have implementation. Well, I mean, next meeting I have to find, you know, money to like even send people to the next meeting, right?
Okay,
so anyway.
thank you. That's important to know, even so it would have been more useful before the adoption call, but anyway. But like my answer is, I would like to phrase it slightly different. So this is the milestones we've put up recently, and like even so that's not common practice, I really want to hold those milestones, honestly, really, because there is a time pressure in this working group, because otherwise if we come not to a solution very soon, nobody will need it anymore. And so if like one of the solution can make this time schedule and the other can't, that's a decision. I don't want to put this as a race, but because it's not a race, but there is some time pressure. And if we have a solution that's working, that's implemented, there's no need for me to wait for anything else.
Lars Eggert, so waiting for one of the horses to die isn't productive, right? They seem pretty healthy to me, so we need to kill one. And I don't know how you kill it. So my personal favorite is a sushi eat-off between the two editing teams or something. But so having two is not helpful here, right? And I really don't care anymore which one it is, right? I just want to have one so that we can actually, you know, make that one really good.
So I'm not killing any horses, and we did this. So if I mean, it's hard for us to say how much people are actually working, how much time they spend on this, and how much money they spend or whatever. But if the case would be, we would be a small group, and like we would not have the energy to work on 2 proposals, then that's very true. But there are so many people, we got so many feedback that people are interested to implement. Actually, we got feedback that people are interested to implement one or the other solution. So please go for it. And like we had the impression that there is enough energy to run a little bit more for both proposals, and by a little bit, I mean this schedule. It's not for the next 10 years.
Lars, I promise this is the last time I'm coming to the mic on this. But so clearly having 2 proposals splits the attention of the working group, right? Because you need to read 2 documents, you need to understand them both, you need to have them both in your head. And we've done this for a while now, right? And I don't think going forward in this mode longer is going to be very good.
So Lars, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You've held a number of ISTAR positions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that a decision made in this working group to choose one of these proposals would stick? Did you see what I saw in the adoption calls for the 2 drafts?
What do you mean by stick?
How would you like to write the response to the appeal?
I'm not on the body that does that, so.
Well, look at the gentleman behind you. I mean, I've taken a look what I'm new to this, so I've looked back sort of on the mailing list. I've watched the adoption call. There's clear support for both of these. It's not clear to me that these 2 protocols are actually plug compatible. You'll hear different requirements from different people and different opinions about the importance of different requirements.
I'll let the 2 people behind me answer that. Martin's stepping down, so he really doesn't care anymore. And so
Martin Stiemeling, you're responsible or irresponsible area director, I don't know. So I care, but I also see the trouble the chairs see that when we make calls for either one of them, they can take A, B, or A, B, and C, so whatever. It's really hard to impossible to declare rough consensus. And that's why we are here. And I think we should stop arguing about if we should one or two, because we have consensus for running both in the working group. Mm-hmm. The working group had the options, we had discussions for a year, and we are here where we are, and we need to figure out how we continue. And if we burn time on saying like, I understand Lars, and it's okay that it brings it up, but I think we should stop doing this and continue technical work right on.
So because if we're talking about energy, and I have the feeling there's a lot of energy, but what I would like is people who would be interested in implementing one of solutions at any point of time, that might be now, or that might be like at the end of the schedule, or that might be, they might have the same position than us, saying, if you pick one, I would implement it, or otherwise I don't. Please come and talk to us or send us an email so we actually get an overview, how much energy there actually is.
There's a lot of energy in this room. It's more heat than light, though. Sorry, I'm Aaron Falk, Akamai. I am very suspicious of arguments to take action in the IETF that are based on speed, because the IETF does not have a great track record for speed. For most of my experience in the IETF for the last 20 years, it takes between 5 and 10 years to get a draft published as a proposed standard. We've gotten better, and some things actually can move very quickly, but that's not a technical argument. And so I don't think we should make decisions based on expediency, because we're often wrong about how long it takes for things to happen here. I think Martin made a very good point, and so let me repeat it. We had this discussion about how we're going to move forward at the last meeting. We did a consensus call, and I thought there was a pretty clear statement that there were folks in the room that wanted to pursue both for the time being. I don't see any value in reopening that. That is what you said, right, Martin? Yeah.
Christian Wittemar from Microsoft. I have a proposal. Well, let's not go there. Okay. Now, I have a concern about deployment of either solution. And for example, suppose that we stick either TCP crypt or the TLS injection under FTP. I run that in my home. It goes to the FTP ALG in the NAT, and the FTP ALG says, what the heck, that doesn't look like FTP, and scratches it. So that's just one example of a potential deployment issue. I'd like to see, since our goal is to deploy opportunistic encryption, I'd like to see a couple of target deployment scenario and say, hey, let's deploy the solution on, I don't know, FTP, HTTP, or some specific application, some specific legacy application for which we want to have opportunistic encryption. And let's pick that as the deployment case and say, we'd like to take that as a benchmark. Do that and show me that you can in fact put it in the server, put it in the clients, and get it done.
Let's see. At the risk of putting somebody on the spot, would one of the TCP crypt folks have any insight into what applications you see you see your code currently being used with?
So I think that like one obvious one would be NFS. A lot of people are still using, like NFS3 and stuff, and that's totally unencrypted. Yeah, FTP is problematic because precisely because of these because of the ports that are being transmitted and interactions with NAT. But there is. I'll talk about this a little bit in the API talk. Like we have a proposal for how this can get rolled out, and part of it is that there should be like DHCP hooks in your DHCP client probe the network a little bit before deciding what to enable, so that we can go through an intermediary phase where it's it's enabled where it works, and then once we sort of get critical mass there, we'll get more middle box friendliness. So we could do FTP like not behind a NAT, for example, as a simple starting point.
So, Christian, I think this part of my response to your question is, opposed to trying to say in advance, what is going to be used for? Let's take a look at what people out there have been interested in it for, because there have been versions of TCP crypt code available for download for quite some time. Some information on what people who downloaded them used them for might provide some insight to your question about where are the likely early targets for adoption.
Well, I mean, I said, if I don't have a clear deployment scenario, like target applications, I get the point about NFS, and we could do the same thing for the equivalent for Microsoft will be the legacy stuff, which actually runs over TLS today. So we don't have that, but.
Okay, but I mean, the goal in Charter is opportunistic encryption for all TCP traffic without changing the application.
I understand that. And the problem is that although you don't have to change the application, the point is, even what David was saying, is that we might have to change the network.
So,
if only the DHCP
so
server.
These documents are all experimental, and we have to experiment very carefully, and we probably have to get to a point where we talk about how this experiment looks like.
Exactly.
And we will do it.
Exactly. And one of the things Christian points out is actually generalized. What he basically said is that FTP through a NAT requires an ALG. Given the requirements for encryption and authentication that we're pursuing here, no protocol coming out of this working group is likely to work well through any ALG, period. So FTP, sorry.
So that's the agenda. We're already behind time. So we have like very little time to bash the agenda, but I still want to give you the opportunity, but otherwise I would like the next speaker to come up here.
Does this should be switched way back?
The mic? Hello? Okay, cool, yeah. All right, cool. Hey, so I'm Andrea. I'm going to talk about TCP which is the new draft we submitted